the next session, we have got one more session now, is by Richard Antony. He is the chair of the Zero Waste International Alliance, ZWIA, and several other zero waste NGOs. Mr. Antony will be the zero waste approach, which began in his career in public administration in 1971 as a manager of the California State University Long Beach Recycling Center and received a MS in public administration in 1974. Mr. Antony has worked his entire career in environmental program management positions. Mr. Antony is the founder and member of the board of directors of the California Resource Recovery Association, the Grassroots Recycling Network, the Zero Waste. And Mr. Antony is the first person, I could able to get in contact because when we are looking for the speakers on the solid waste side, and he could able to get his group, and that's how our umbrella is complete with water, wastewater, stormwater, where our people are having a lot of expertise, but we are looking for the solid waste side. Thank you, Mr. Antony. And now I invite Richard Antony.
It's okay, I'm going to talk from here. Sam, is that right? I like to move, and my life is garbage. But I'm in recovery now. I am in recovery. All right, that's my joke. We're going to talk about a zero waste to sustainability and jobs. And this was first put together in 2002 in China, where we made a presentation in green chemistry. And the deal was that all these firms in Europe were talking about the residual had to be burned, and the residual was like 40 to 50%. To me, a residual is like 1%, so I couldn't buy that. So I put together this particular slideshow. Can we go with it? So first of all, this came about by Dr. Dan Knapp, who's a sociologist who got tired of teaching, and he went to work at a landfill, at a dump, and literally scavenging. And pretty soon, you know what a sociologist does, they group things. So he started grouping things. And when he found that everything in the landfill was one of these 12 categories. 12 categories. And that they're all about markets. And this is one thing I want to say, because all the speeches you've got about the recycling programs show a collection truck and a processing system. Do you even know where it goes? What happens after it leaves the materials recovery facility? Where does it go? And that's the key. When I teach my classes, I say your number one friend is your market, not the hauler. It's the market. It's the guy who's going to buy that stuff for you, because you're going to make it right, and you'll provide it to him, and you'll always have a place for it to go. So all waste, all discards can be divided into these 12 categories. And what's really key about this one is that the bottom half, these are all organic materials. Putrescibles, food scraps, yard trimmings, soil, wood. These are all things that can be ground up and compost and put in your soil, and you grow food for your community. So it's nuts that we ever put that in the landfill in the first place. And in the old days, up until the end of World War II in the USA, we were 95% recycling. Absolutely. Pig farmers got all the food. After the end of the war, consumption, landfills, that kind of stuff. Next slide. So, read William McDonough's Cradle to Cradle. So the problem with the life cycle analysis to me is it includes a landfill or an incinerator as one of your options. So now the option to pollute is now in part of your system design. That's incorrect. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation put together this flow chart, and basically this is called the closed circle economy. When we talked about this in China back in 2002, they went, oh, closed circle economy, good idea. Well, the idea is that on the green loop, that's your organics. So all your why would you take it to the landfill? You take your organics to a composting facility. And that's that loop. The blue loop is your technical. McDonough says, architect, it's either organic or it's technical. If it's between, it shouldn't be made. It's a mistake. So you got your technical, you got your organic, and the bottom, that's what slips through the cracks. Diapers, composites, we call legacies. About 8%, 10% of what's going into the landfill are those contaminants that could be redesigned. A diaper that has reuse capabilities is the answer for this. Why would you have a throwaway diaper? How can you have a wet system and have plastic in the system? So the closed circle is what we're heading for. This is the idea how we sustain the planet. Next. So these are your 12 categories. The number one is reusables. For me, it's a real insane thing. I go to landfill, work for my clients, and I take pictures, and he's got a great curbside program. He's got a yard waste program. And what's in the landfill? Grandma's couch, the dinette set. It's like, why? That's insane. This stuff, reusables, and when you look at the value of it in the landfill, is worth about a third of all the materials. And about in Delaware, where we did the study, about 1 million tons was worth about $50 million when you took all these categories and add cost to them. So think about it. You're paying, $50, $100 a ton to bury it, or $200 to burn it. But if you could separate and sell it and get 50, that's a big margin to be able to figure out how to pencil that out. So paper, plant debris, putrescibles, things that putrefy. Typically, the garbage pail was always something that putrefies, and you would have water in the bottom of the pail. Wood, ceramics. Ceramics are rocks, and anything that's actually the definition. It's anything that can crumble. So it's not just a place, but it's all rocks and kind of materials. And they can be moved together. You can build, these are building materials. Soils, metals, glass, polymers, that's plastic. So polymers and rubber fits in that as well. Textiles and chemicals. So these are the 12 categories. So just as for an example, a reusable material, we figure is about 6%. God, I've been sampling garbage since it seemed like a kid, really. From 1974, we did some of the first sampling sorts in California, San Francisco. From then on, Fresno County, when I ran that division, we did sorts there. From there, we went from 7 to 14. In San Diego, when we did the sorts, we had 21 different categories. And literally, we found out that about 6% of what's there are these furniture and chairs and tables. And when you put them on a pallet and you had a ton of them and you sold them, they're worth about $400. So that's a huge amount. So why I would call that out immediately. All reusables, all bulky pickups go to a warehouse where they can be repaired, dismantled, sold to the thrift industry. It's a huge market out there, and they want it. So there's, and I had pictures of paper, plates, flatware, things that are reusable. So the second one is paper, about 21%. Until last week, it was probably worth about $100 a ton for all mixed paper. I'll blame it on the guys from Iowa, I think. The bottom line is when China and India decided to industrialize and build their plants in about 2000, there was this big sucking sound of all these resources coming this way. And at that time, there were so many containers on our docks that you could put in a container and ship it over almost for nothing. And that became, what it did is lowered the bar for everybody. We had spent 20 years building a recycling ethic where we separated by color of glass and type of paper and resin. We had that down, and then all of a sudden, you're buying in bulk. But last year, Chinese said, no, we don't need this stuff anymore. Our standard of living is getting too high. We can't pay for cheap labor. You cannot send your stuff to us. It has to be clean. It has to be mil specs. But in mil specs means I can sell white ledger paper in an office building, which is 90% of what's generated there, and I can sell for $200, $300 a ton. Why would I sell it as mixed paper? So anyhow, markets. You got to know your markets if you're going to get in this business. Plant debris, well, of course, this is your fundamental bulking agent in your composting facility. It gives you your carbon you need to build what you have, about 3%. In a market price, when you figure in the total finished compost, it's worth about $55. There's a processing cost. Maybe it's 30 to 50, I don't know, to do a composting facility. But in California, we've just, the two governors, Schwarzenegger and Brown, looked at if we recycled everything in California, we could eliminate, it'd be similar to eliminate all the exhaust from all the cars. So all of a sudden, global warming is the issue, and 75% requirement, and then they did a flyby all over the landfills. And everybody's city climate plan, number 1 was traffic, number 2 was agriculture, number 3 was the landfill waste. So he had planes fly over the landfills, and what they found is these giant methane flares. That one was very scary. And so they asked the air board, what a bunch of engineers going to say, how do you mitigate methane from a landfill? Don't put it in. So something we've been advocating, cool, keep organics out of the landfill for 15 years. All of a sudden, the engineers figured it out, said, no, 75% reduction of organics in the landfill by 2020. And then up to. And in Northern California, that works. Southern California, we're in a world of hurt, and we're going to start building facilities. But look, if it can't go to the landfill, your competition just went away. You can now build a viable business and not have the polluters cheat you from what you're doing right. So plant debris, about $35 a ton. Next one. Putrescibles. So this is your nitrogen supply, right? So you got your carbon in your plant debris, and now you got your nitrogen in your food. Mix it together, and what do you got? You got something to put on your farmland to grow food for your community. In a sustainable planet, it's the food, it's the organics that come back to feed the people, and the reusable materials that come back to clothe and furnish. The glass, the metal, the plastic, these are international markets. In Sao Paulo, Brazil versus Fort Collins, Colorado, I get the same price for baled PET. So it's a global market, but the local markets are your compost and your organics. So putrescibles, about more and more, as we pull more bottles and cans to get more and more percentage in and it's very heavy, 26%, worth about 35. And folks, it does include sludge or biosolids or digestate, whatever you want to call it. It does include it. And the thing is, we could put that on the land if we didn't allow people to flush chemicals down the toilet. So that's a real problem. But I think that's what we should do. We should enforce the Clean Water Act, which is a zero waste act. Clean air and clean water are zero waste acts. It says you will not contaminate the waters or the airs of the United States of America. Oh, we give waivers. You can grandfather in. But we take that away. You take that away, it's 50% of pollution in LA are grandfathered in on oil companies, and I get very upset about this. But anyhow, you take the putrescibles, you take the organics, you got compost, you got food for your community. Next one. Wood, of course, wood could be either reused for building materials. Habitat for Humanity gets wood from demolition sites and sells it, resells it. They can be certified. They have guys who come around and certify the wood to be okay. Or it's compost, it's mulch. It can be ground up. So wood, that's 2%, about $15. Ceramics, this is my favorite. In California, it's a 50% requirement for every city to make. And so ceramics, these are rocks. Well, no public works director is going to let his roads guy dump rocks in the landfill. And when I was in San Diego, when I came in, 12% was in my landfill was rocks. First guy was in there. The guy said, "Why are you burying that?" "I'll buy that. I want it." We had to dig holes. Why not extract all the rock and grind it up and sell it for aggregate? So what you'll see, and you'll drive through California, you'll see on a road project or building project, big pile of rubble right beside. That's the feedstock for the next piece of the road. Great idea. About 2% now, maybe $15 a ton. Next. Soils, of course. Why would you bury soils when you could use them in your composting facility or use it as part? That's just, we used to use it for cover on a landfill, but I've decided, I cited 6 years of my life, the first double-line landfill in California in 1985. Got threatened a lot. And every neighborhood we went to, they looked at us and said, "Why aren't you recycling this stuff?" And we said, well, gee, if we just didn't finish this project and just site a landfill in everybody's neighborhood, we'd get everybody on board in the recycling program. Soils. Next. Metals, of course, 9-10%. We've pretty much are extracting metals now. It's easy to get with a magnet. They're worth about $80 a ton. It's a huge market out there. When we do a zero waste plan, we'll figure out how much of this stuff is there. And then I'll go to local scrap dealers and say, look, if I get this material, all this material that we have, this 9%, could you consume it? What do you need the government to do to help you do that? We'll say the same thing with the plastic guys and the metal guys. Because, again, the markets are the close of the circle. It's not the garbage hauler. It's not the collection system. It's where it goes and when it's converted. So that's really important. Next one. Glass. Glass is a problem because of its weight, but it's highly recyclable. What they're learning in the glass plants that if they put it in, they can reduce the energy use by almost a half. We talked them into going to 10% in the 80s. Now, there are some glass plants like in Madeira, 100% scrap charge, and it works. For me, here's a personal, I really am worried about plastic and the plastic in my body. Of course, I'm an old man. It won't matter. I don't need to have any more babies. But the fact is, in the North America, we have the white male population has the lowest sperm rate that's ever had. And it has to do with all the plastics that we're eating. If I would had my way, I'd ban plastic for food and make it all in glass and have every city have a glass plant. But that's just a polemic of mine next. Polymers, plastic, this is the problem. You know, we never, back prior to 1950, there was no litter. I mean, okay, a can or bottle on the roadside, you could pick that up, but plastic is forever. And now when you have bottle bills and deposit legislation, you look on the roadside, it's all plastic. And you look what's happening to the ocean as it's growing geometrically. It's very insane. A personal buddy of mine is Captain Moore, who's the guy who first documented the gyre out there. And you know, Charlie comes back. Every time he comes back, he's horrified. He said, you know, last time I was in the gyre, they underneath the catamaran 4 times to get all the plastic out of the rudders. And they're 200 miles from nowhere, and there's little streams of plastic running under. In Italy, he pulled out these fins that said "Made in Italy" just to show them how far a fin could go underneath the water. Polymers, 9%. Now, here's the deal. This stuff is highly recyclable. It really is. It's a lie that you say plastic isn't recyclable. It is. It's just like metal, gold, silver. It's all different. These are different metal types. There's different resin types, too. So, number 1, number 2, polyethylene. McCloskey's tools. He made barricades and these spray things out of plastic. It was a blow molding facility. He came to me. I was director of resource recovery for the county, and he said, if you buy me a grinder and a washer, I'll buy all your number 1 and number 2 plastics from Oceanside all the way down to Del Mar. Well, I had a grand program. Did it. He did it, and we did it. We were picking them off right off the curb, consuming them locally. The Cormex came to me. They wanted all our film plastic. Built a plant in Tijuana. Took film plastic and threw in these molten balls, and then in pneumatic tubes, and we're making garbage cans out of it. It's a brilliant idea. It smelled a little bit like garbage. Was the problem, but what I'm saying is it's an easily melted and fabricated item. If it was separated, it could be useful. The majority of the plastics out there are 1s and 2s and 5s. They're the great majority, polypropylene. And now most of the haulers have figured out lasers. The lasers kick them right off the belt. Anyhow, I'm not an advocate. I think break free from plastic is a good idea, but I think there's some uses in industry, and it needs to be set up as a recycle. You know, we have scrap yards, we have paper yards. I don't know why we don't have a resin yard. You bring in your separated materials, they give you money. What's wrong with that? It's a great idea. I think if you had deposits on all your plastic bags or all your plastics on the street, people would pick them up and collect them. You call it the informal collectors. These are the recyclers. Next. Textiles, clothing, of course, India does a lot of textile buying and making a lot of clothing, making scrap, making new threads, new materials, or just used clothing. I mean, Levi's today anywhere in the world are like a cash crop. What else? The last, chemicals. Well, you know, you don't want them in the landfill, you don't want them in the incinerator, and they're really worth stuff. You spend a lot of money to buy that paint or that chemical. So what we have is exchanges where you bring your stuff into a hazardous waste facility near the landfill, and people can come in and take the stuff right off and use it. So the idea is to not throw it out. But for me, in the zero waste world, if it's going to be hazardous, you have to, and you're going to make it. You take it back and you deal with it, or don't make it with hazardous materials. It's no longer acceptable to throw a hazardous thing out on society and make the public take care of it. And what happens? It's wrong. So when you have these 12 categories and you're going, okay, Rick, one more. Well, I'm not going to separate in 12 categories. And I say you don't have to. You really don't. Because you're already separating paper and containers anyhow. Anybody who has a curbside program, paper and containers are the number 1 product. If you were on a farm, you would save the containers, you'd use that. That's only really what you had, and you'd burn the paper as a fuel. Organics always went back to the animals, always been back on the farm. It's a natural stream. It's only in the urban cities that we've started to mix them all. But if we separate them out, that goes to a composting facility. The paper and containers go to a materials recovery facility, which is a series of conveyor belts with magnets and air knives and all kinds of Rube Goldberg stuff. The lasers are, you watch them shoot plastic off the belt, it'll blow your mind, it really will. Organics to the composting facility. Discarded items, reusables, that should go to a big warehouse. And you should open it up for, first of all, thrift stores and then repair shops and then dismantle it for recycling. That's where the homeless can have jobs and do stuff. Special discards, again, these are the chemicals. You can have either hazardous waste facilities, or we're now requiring them to take it back where it's sold. Batteries go back, meds go back to the pharmacies. Makes sense. It makes them responsible. Next one. So you have those categories, those clusters, and then you go to a MRF, to a composting facility, to a reuse and repair, inerts. Well, I've seen a lot of cities. Fort Collins is a good one. Everybody pulls a permit has to have recovery. It's just the way it is. Building inspector said that's what's going to be. And they have a big yard that's run by the city, and that's where they have the rock and the asphalt and all these building bricks and materials. And anybody who wants to come and use them, it's theirs now, a community asset, really. So that's your nerds and then your household. I think one more, right? I love this one. This is I have yet to have somebody call me on this one. We did this Institute of Self-Reliance. Basically, when you have a landfill, you got one job for 10,000 tons of material coming in. Well, if you had a composting, you would have about 4. Conventional materials recovery, about 10. Then you start talking about in the recycling industries, and then you got paper and glass and plastic, and there's about 150, 200 jobs. And then in product reuse, just taking out the computer for repair or textile reclamation or a durable reuse, there's about 200 jobs. So it's about 500 jobs. If you don't burn it or bury it, you're just freeing up 500 jobs to have people go to work. How could that be bad? And if it's worth $50 billion for a million tons, then there's money in there. And it's not a big job, but some of them is worth a lot more. Some people are going to run companies, and some people are going to work on the line. To me, that's the way we ought to go. Do I have another one? So tomorrow, Ruth and I got 3 hours. If you really are interested, we'll go into the roots and the basics of zero waste. See, here's the deal. Here's our problem with waste. I spent my last 5 years in government before I started my own company and started writing zero waste plans in wastewater management. And what I got from the guys was, you guys in solid waste, you really hit the idea on communication, on telling the public on recycling and reuse. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Everybody knows that. But in wastewater, they don't know. And the reason is, in solid waste, you have 5 different operators. You have 5 collectors, you got landfill operators, you got MRF operators, you got markets. There are a whole series of people that you have to talk to make, whereas wastewater, it's almost a monopoly. You got into the trunk line, down to the sewer treatment plant, and really, you want to make sure these guys don't dump stuff in there. So we think it's really important, the social side. I mean, the engineering side, you got it down. You really do. But it's all about communicating to people. It's about letting people know, look, we don't want you to flush medicine down the toilet. There's another way to do it. We don't want you to dump your chemicals down the toilet. We want you to, this is what goes, because we're going to use this to grow food later on, folks. We don't want you to toxify it. I believe with a good effort, we can do this. So we came up with the bottom 3 were the basic principles of zero waste. But the top one, the social justice people really got on our back. It's an international peer-reviewed definition. Over 40 different people from 40 different countries have looked at this definition, and they wanted it just a little bit higher. So zero waste is the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to the land, water, or air that threaten environment or human health. None. Unacceptable to design a system that's going to create a pollution. Look, that's how these guys make money. They put it out to the landfill and the incinerators so they don't have to design it for reuse and repair. So they're profiting off polluting the planet. I couldn't have said this in 1970, but I can say it today. We see it. In front of us, you could see the air in some of your cities. And I was born in Los Angeles, so I know what thick air looks like. So Zero waste is a goal that's ethical, economical, efficient, and visionary to guide people in changing their lifestyles and practices to emulate sustainable natural cycles where all discarded materials are designed to become resources for other use. Designed for the environment. When you make a product, figure out either it's compostable or recyclable. We say if it's not compostable or recyclable, then you can't sell it. Or you want to be liberal about it, you can sell it, but you got to take it back because we don't want it. We don't want it in our system. Zero waste means designing and managing products and processes to systematically avoid and eliminate the volume and toxicity of waste and materials, conserve and recover all resources, and not burn or bury them. So we want to eliminate landfill. And I'm a landfill guy. I ran landfills for 20 years. But they're wrong. They're horrible. I mean, I watched 3,000 tons go in this canyon, and they filled it right up. And what was it? What was it? So the last one is implementing zero waste to eliminate all discharges to land, water, and air that are a threat to planetary, human, animal, and plant health. And here's my bottom line on this one. I'm not old as the other guy, but I'm old. I'm in my 70s, and I'm not sure if I'm going to make it to 2030 or not. I'd like to see it, but I'm afraid of what happens. I believe the UN when they're telling you that if we don't stop this stuff, I'm sorry, India, 11 waste to energy plants? We're not building any waste to energy plants in the United States. We're not building any oil-fired power plants. We're not building any coal-fired power plants. They're all solar and wind. If we're going to make it through the next 10 years, we're going to have to convert our cars to electrical cars and our cities to be run on solar and wind. We can do that. We can use our fuel, our oil, to lubricate our parts and get jets off the ground, but we don't need to run a city off that when we can do solar. And you have to think about it. You have to be serious. If you can clean up the lake in 55 days, I really believe that, I said that to Ruth this morning, I think India in 5 years could be all electric if they really wanted to. You got the entrepreneurship from the bottom up here to make it happen. Do I have another slide? So that's the bottom line: is our resources are not infinite, folks. They're limited, and the population of the earth is now at 7 billion. We need to take care of business. I hope you can come to our workshop tomorrow, and I'll give you some more details on how I think you can get there. Thanks a lot.